"Will you ride us there safely, please?" She begged. The Apache agreed. "Swear you'll find me again." New Mexico Territory, high desert country. Early winter 1883. The night carried the scent of juniper and frost. Sharp enough to sting the lungs, cold enough to make breath visible in pale clouds that hung in the air like ghosts. The stars overhead blazed with a brilliance that only existed in places far from civilization, scattered across the black canvas of sky like shattered diamonds. The land stretched endless in every direction, broken only by the jagged silhouettes of mesas and the twisted shapes of ancient cottonwoods that clung to life in the dry creek beds. Intoys moved through the dark without sound, his moccasins finding purchase on stone and sand with the ease of a man who had walked this land since childhood. Every rock, every shadow, every shift in the wind carried meaning to him, spoke a language he had learned long before he knew the words white men used. The rifle across his back was old, but reliable. The stock worn smooth from years of handling. The barrel scratched but true. The knife at his belt was older still, passed down from his grandfather, who had taken it from a Mexican soldier during a raid 40 years prior. The blade had tasted blood more times than Intoys cared to count. But it had also skinned deer, carved wood, cut rope, saved lives. He had been tracking the mule deer for 2 days, following its path through the scrub and over the ridges, reading the story it left behind in broken twigs and disturbed earth, patient, methodical, waiting for the right moment. The deer was smart, staying to the high ground during the day, moving only at dawn and dusk when the light made tracking harder. But tonight the trail had vanished entirely, and in its place Intoys found something else, something that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. A wagon, overturned. He saw it from a distance first. A dark shape that did not belong, angular and unnatural against the organic curves of the land. He approached slowly, every sense alert, his hand moving instinctively to the rifle, easing it forward across his shoulder until the stock rested against his palm. Ready, the wooden frame lay on its side near a dried creek bed. One wheel shattered into splinters. The axle snapped clean through, as if it had struck something hard at speed or been deliberately broken. Scattered around it were the remnants of a life interrupted. Blankets tangled in the brush, a cast iron pot lying upside down in the dirt, a torn sack of cornmeal spilling white across the red earth like snow. A child's doll with a broken porcelain face staring sightlessly at the sky. The horses were gone, either fled in panic or stolen by whoever had done this. The air smelled faintly of gunpowder. Recent but not immediate, perhaps an hour old, maybe 2. Intoys crouched low beside the wagon, his fingers brushing the splintered wood. Still warm from the day's sun but cooling fast, he scanned the ground, reading the story written in bootprints and blood. 3 riders had come from the east, their horses shod, which meant white men, not Apache. They had circled the wagon like wolves around wounded prey. There had been a confrontation. The driver had tried to resist. Intoys found where he had fallen, the dark stain on the ground still wet, still sticky. The man was dead, no question. Dragged off into the brush and left there. But there were other tracks too, smaller, lighter, running north toward the rocks. A woman and children, moving fast, desperate, stumbling in places but never stopping. The 3 riders had followed for a time, then turned south, perhaps assuming their prey would die in the desert anyway, perhaps losing interest when the chase became too difficult in the dark, or perhaps planning to come back at first light when tracking would be easier. Intoys stood slowly, his jaw tight, his eyes following the northern trail into the maze of stone and shadow. This was not his concern. White settlers and their troubles were a common sight in this territory. Wagon trains attacked, families scattered. Lives ended in the space between one breath and the next. The soldiers blamed the Apache blamed the soldiers. The truth was that evil wore many faces and spoke many languages. Helping these people, whoever they were, would likely bring him nothing but danger, suspicion, perhaps even a noose if the wrong people decided he was involved in the attack. But something pulled at him. Something he could not name, instinct perhaps, or the memory of his own mother fleeing through the night with him as a child, running from soldiers who burned their village, killed his father, scattered his people like leaves in the wind. He remembered the terror in her eyes, the way her hand had gripped his so tight it hurt, the way she had whispered prayers to spirits she no longer believed could hear her. He followed the northern trail. The tracks led into a narrow canyon, the walls steep and unforgiving, rising 50 feet on either side. The floor littered with fallen stones and the dried skeletons of long-dead trees. Shadows pooled thick between the rocks, turning the path into a maze of darkness and half-light. The moon overhead provided just enough illumination to see shapes but not details, enough to move but not quickly. Intois moved carefully, his footsteps silent, his breathing controlled, listening, watching, using all the skills his grandfather had taught him before the old man died, before the world changed and took everything familiar with it. He heard the wind moving through the canyon, the distant cry of a nighthawk, the skitter of a lizard across stone. And then he heard it, a child's cough, muffled and strained. The sound of someone trying desperately to stay quiet, but failing. Coming from behind a cluster of boulders near the canyon wall about 30 yards ahead. Intois stopped, his hand tightening on the rifle. He could rush forward, surprise them. But that would only create panic, and panicked people made mistakes. Mistakes that got everyone killed. Instead he raised his hand in a gesture of peace. Though he knew they could not see him yet in the darkness, then he spoke, his voice low and calm, carrying just far enough to be heard without echoing off the canyon walls. "I am not here to harm you." Silence, complete and total, as if the entire canyon held its breath. Then the sound of movement, cautious, fearful. The scrape of boots on stone, the rustle of fabric. "Stay back," a woman's voice called out, hoarse and trembling, but trying to sound strong. "I am armed, I will shoot." "I believe you," Intois replied, taking one slow step forward, still keeping his hands visible. "But if you shoot me, the sound will carry for miles. The men who attacked your wagon will hear it, they will come back. And this time they will not leave until they find you." Another long silence. He could hear her breathing now, fast and shallow. The breathing of someone on the edge of collapse. "Who are you?" She asked. "My name is Intois," he said. "I am Apache. I live in these hills. I hunt. I trade. I harm no one unless they harm me first. I found your wagon. I followed your tracks. I came to see if you were alive. Why?" Suspicion sharp in her voice. "Because it seemed like the right thing to do," he said simply. He took another step forward, slowly, carefully, moving into a patch of moonlight so she could see him clearly. See that he was alone. See that his rifle was still across his back. Unthreatening, from behind the rocks, a woman emerged. She was thin. Her dress torn at the hem and stained with dust and what might have been blood. Her hair, once pinned neatly, now hung loose around her shoulders. Tangled and wild with bits of brush caught in it, her face was pale in the moonlight. Eyes wide with exhaustion and terror, but also with a fierce determination that reminded Intois of a cornered mountain lion. Dangerous precisely because she had nothing left to lose. She held herself upright, despite the way her body swayed slightly with fatigue. One arm wrapped protectively around a small girl who clung to her skirts, face buried against her mother's side, the other hand gripping a revolver. The barrel shaking slightly but aimed directly at his chest, her finger rested on the trigger. Not pulling but ready. "Stay back," she said again. But this time her voice cracked. The fear breaking through, Intois did not move. He had seen enough frightened people to know when someone was close to breaking. One wrong word, one sudden motion, and she would pull the trigger, whether she meant to or not. Fear made people do things they regretted later. If there was a later, I will stay here, he said. His tone even, unthreatening, gentle in a way he had not used in a long time. But you are not safe in this canyon. It is a trap, only one way in, one way out. The men who attacked your wagon, they may come back at dawn to finish what they started. You cannot defend this position, not with children, not alone. The woman's jaw tightened, her eyes searching his face for deception, for threat, for any sign that he was like the men who had destroyed her wagon and killed her driver. But all she saw was a man standing still in the moonlight, waiting, patient, his hands open and empty of malice. Then a boy stepped out from behind her, older than the girl, perhaps 9 or 10. His face smudged with dirt and streaked with the tracks of dried tears he would probably deny shedding. His eyes were sharp and watchful, too old for his age. The eyes of a child who had seen things children should never see. He carried a small hunting knife, held awkwardly in a white-knuckled grip, but with a determination that was both brave and heartbreaking. "We do not need your help," the boy said, his voice cracking slightly, trying to sound like a man. Trying to protect his mother and sister the only way he knew how. Intoys tilted his head, studying the child with something close to respect, then the woman, then the little girl whose face was still buried against her mother's side. Small shoulders shaking with silent sobs, he saw the way the woman swayed slightly, exhaustion pulling at her like an undertow, the way her free hand trembled despite her efforts to control it, the way her breath came too fast, too shallow. The signs of someone running on nothing but willpower and terror. "You are right," Intoy said, his voice soft, respectful. "You do not need my help. You are strong, you are brave, you have protected your family this far. But your mother is hurt. I can see it in the way she stands. And your sister is sick. I can hear it in her breathing. And you," he looked directly at the boy, "you are exhausted, you cannot stay awake much longer. None of you can, and when you sleep, who will keep watch? Who will hear the men coming back?" The boy's expression faltered, the knife lowering slightly. The woman's grip on the revolver loosened just a fraction, not much but enough. "Who are you?" she asked again, but this time the question meant something different. This time she was asking if she could trust him. "My name is Intoys," he repeated. "I was born in these mountains. My people have lived here for generations beyond counting. I know every trail, every water source, every place to hide. I can get you to safety. To Silver Ridge, if that is where you need to go. But only if you trust me, only if you let me help." The woman stared at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face, looking for lies, for hidden motives, for any reason to pull the trigger and end this before it began. But all she saw was a man who had come alone into a dark canyon to help strangers. A man who could have killed them already if that was his intent. A man who stood patiently in the open and waited for her decision. Finally, slowly, she lowered the revolver, just a fraction. Her voice came out as barely more than a whisper. Raw and broken, "My name is Thea Kingsley," she said. "These are my children, Tucker and Faye. We were traveling to Silver Ridge to meet my brother. He has a ranch there. He sent for us after my husband died. But we were attacked on the road, the driver, Mr. Holloway. He tried to fight them, but they shot him. They killed him right in front of us. The horses bolted, the wagon overturned, we ran. We have been hiding here for hours. I do not know if they are still looking for us. I do not know what to do." Her voice broke on the last word. The facade of strength crumbling, Intoy saw the moment it happened. Saw the terror and grief and exhaustion finally overwhelming her. But she did not collapse. She held herself together through sheer force of will. For her children, because they needed her to be strong. Silver Ridge is 2 days north on foot, Intoy said quietly. Maybe 3 with children. The trail is difficult. There is little water. The nights are cold, but I know the way. I can get you there safely if you do exactly as I say. No questions, no arguments. If I tell you to run, you run. If I tell you to hide, you hide. If I tell you to be silent, you do not make a sound. Do you understand? Thea nodded quickly, desperately. Yes, yes, I understand. Anything, just please help us, please. Tucker stepped forward, his young face set with determination. What if you are lying? What if you are leading us into a trap? Intoy looked at the boy, saw the intelligence there, the protective instinct. That is a good question, he said seriously, treating the child with the respect he deserved. You should not trust strangers. Your mother taught you well. But ask yourself this, if I wanted to harm you, why would I warn you first? Why would I stand here talking instead of simply taking what I want? I am armed, you are exhausted. I could have done anything already. But instead I am offering you a choice. Come with me and live. Or stay here and wait for the men who killed your driver to come back and finish what they started. Tucker considered this, his jaw working. Then slowly, reluctantly, he nodded. Thea's shoulders sagged with relief so profound it nearly brought her to her knees. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you. Do not thank me yet, Intoy said, his voice still calm but with an edge of seriousness that made her look up sharply. We are not safe. We will not be safe until you are with your brother in Silver Ridge. The journey will be hard. Your children will suffer. You will suffer. I cannot promise it will be easy, but I can promise I will do everything in my power to get you there alive. That is all I ask, Thea said. Intoy stepped closer, slowly, carefully, watching for any sign that she might panic and raised a revolver again. But she stood still, waiting, trusting. When he was close enough to see her face clearly in the moonlight, he stopped, his dark eyes meeting hers. There is one more thing, he said, his voice dropping lower, taking on a weight that made the air between them feel suddenly heavier, charged with something neither of them could name. When we reach Silver Ridge, when you are safe with your brother, when this is over. He paused, his gaze intense, unwavering. Swear you will find me again. The words hung in the air between them. Strange and sudden, unexpected, Thea blinked, confusion flickering across her exhausted features. I do not understand, she said softly. Why would you want me to find you? Once we reach Silver Ridge, you will be free of us, free of this burden. Why would you ask me to come back? Intoy's was quiet for a long moment, his eyes still locked on hers. And in that silence, Thea saw something in his face. Something vulnerable and carefully hidden. Something that spoke of loneliness so deep and long-standing that it had become part of him. Woven into his bones, because, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper, I do not make promises I cannot keep. And I need to know that you will keep yours. I need to know that when this is over, when you are safe and warm and surrounded by family, you will remember the man who walked beside you through the dark. I need to know I will not simply fade away like smoke, forgotten the moment I am no longer useful. Thea's breath caught in her throat, tears welling in her eyes. Not from fear now, but from something else. Something that felt dangerously close to understanding, to connection, to the recognition of one lonely soul seeing another. I swear, she whispered, her voice fierce despite its softness. I swear on my children's lives I will find you again. I do not know why you ask this of me. I do not know what it means. But I swear it. I will not forget you. I will not let you fade away, I promise. Intoy nodded once, something in his expression easing, a tension she had not even noticed releasing from his shoulders. Then we have an agreement, he said. He turned, moving back toward the canyon entrance, his voice taking on the calm, commanding tone of someone who had led others before. We leave now. Gather what you can carry. Water, blankets, anything that will keep the children warm. Leave everything else. Speed and silence are more important than comfort. Stay close, stay quiet. If you fall behind, I will not come back for you." It was a lie, and somehow, deep in her heart, Thea knew it. They gathered what little they had. Thea's hands shaking as she wrapped Faye in the one blanket that had not been lost in the chaos. Tucker collecting the canteen, checking the revolver to see how many bullets remained. 4, only 4. Intoys watched them work, noting the way Thea moved despite her exhaustion. The way Tucker tried to help his mother without being asked. The way Faye clung silently to her mother's skirts. Too frightened or too tired to cry anymore. When they were ready, Intoys led them out of the canyon. Moving like a shadow, his footsteps silent even on loose stone. Thea followed, carrying Faye on her back now. The girl's small arms wrapped around her mother's neck, her face buried against her shoulder. Tucker walked beside Intoys, trying to match his stride. Trying to prove he was strong enough, brave enough, worthy of being treated like a man. The night stretched out before them, vast and unforgiving. The stars overhead offering light, but no comfort. The land empty and cold, and filled with unseen dangers. And somewhere behind them, perhaps already on their trail, the men who had destroyed their wagon were circling back, hunting. But Intoys moved through the dark with absolute confidence, and Thea followed, her children close. Her heart pounding with fear and exhaustion, and something else, something she could not name. Something that felt dangerously, impossibly, like hope. They walked for hours through terrain that seemed designed to break the spirit. The canyon walls eventually giving way to open desert where the wind cut like a blade and the cold seeped through every layer of clothing. The moon traced its arc across the sky, indifferent to the small group of humans struggling across the sand and stone below. Intoys led them along paths that were barely paths at all. Sometimes nothing more than animal trails or the faint depressions left by ancient water flows long since dried to dust. Faye had fallen completely asleep on Thea's back within the first hour. Her small body a dead weight that made every step harder. Made Thea's shoulders scream and her legs shake. But she did not complain, did not ask to stop. She simply put one foot in front of the other and trusted that the Apache walking ahead of her knew where he was going. Tucker stumbled twice in the dark, his exhaustion finally catching up to him, but each time he caught himself. Jaw set in grim determination, refusing to show weakness, refusing to be the one who slowed them down. Intoys watched them both without seeming to, his attention appearing to be entirely focused on the trail ahead, on scanning for threats, but he saw everything. The way Thea's steps grew shorter, less steady. The way Tucker's shoulders hunched forward as if he were carrying a weight far heavier than the small pack on his back. He saw it all and said nothing, knowing that acknowledging their struggle would only make it harder for them to continue. As the first hint of dawn began to pale the eastern sky, turning it from black to deep purple, Intoys led them off the main trail, such as it was, and into a narrow defile between two massive rock formations that leaned toward each other like ancient giants frozen in the act of embracing. The space between them was barely wide enough for a man to walk through sideways, but it opened into a hidden pocket of space. A natural shelter formed by the way the rocks had fallen centuries ago. "Here," Intoy said. His first word in over 2 hours, "We rest." Thea nearly collapsed with relief, lowering herself carefully to the ground so as not to jostle Faye awake. The little girl stirred but did not wake, her breathing steady and peaceful in a way that tore at Thea's heart, because children should not sleep this deeply. This desperately, Tucker sat heavily beside his mother, his eyes already closing despite his best efforts to stay alert. Intoys moved around the small space with quiet efficiency, checking sight lines, making sure they could not be seen from outside. Then he pulled a small leather pouch from inside his shirt and removed what looked like dried meat and a handful of something else. Thea could not identify in the dim light. "Eat," he said, offering it to her. Thea took it gratefully. The meat was tough, heavily salted. But it was food, and her stomach had been empty for nearly a full day. She chewed slowly, making it last. Then woke Faye gently and convinced the girl to eat a few small bites before she fell back asleep. Tucker ate without being asked, his hunger overcoming his suspicion. "What is it?" Thea asked quietly, gesturing to the handful of dried berries or seeds. She could not tell which. "Piñon nuts," Intoy said, "and dried chokecherries. They will give you strength." She ate them. They were bitter and sweet at the same time. Unlike anything she had tasted before. When she finished, she looked up to find Intoy's watching her, his dark eyes unreadable in the growing light. "Thank you," she said, "for all of this, for helping us. I know you did not have to. I know we are strangers to you." "Everyone is a stranger until they are not," Intoy replied. His voice quiet. Thea studied him in the pale dawn light. Really seeing him for the first time, he was tall, lean in the way of men who lived hard lives with little excess. His face was angular, sharp cheekbones, and a strong jaw. His hair hung past his shoulders, black as night, tied back with leather cord. His skin was the color of copper, his eyes dark and penetrating. There was a scar on his left temple, old and faded, and another along his right forearm, newer, still pink. He wore clothes that were a mixture of Apache and white, buckskin pants and moccasins, but a cotton shirt that had probably been traded or taken from somewhere. A leather vest over it, decorated with simple geometric patterns. "How old are you?" she asked, then immediately felt foolish for asking. 36 winters, he said, amusement flickering briefly across his face. "And you?" 27, Thea said, "though I feel much older today." "Age is not always counted in years," Intoy said. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. The only sound the wind whistling softly through the rocks and Tucker's soft snoring. Finally Thea spoke again, her voice hesitant. "May I ask you something?" Intoy nodded. "Why do you live alone? Do you not have family, a tribe?" His expression closed slightly. Not with anger, but with old pain, carefully controlled. "I had a wife once," he said, his voice flat. Emotionless in the way of someone who has told a story so many times, it no longer hurts. Or who has buried the hurt so deep it cannot surface. "She was Mescalero Apache. We were young. We thought love was enough to protect us from the world. We were wrong. Soldiers came to our village. They said we had stolen cattle. We had not, but it did not matter. They came with guns and fire. My wife was killed in the attack, shot while trying to run. She was carrying our child. They both died." Thea's hand flew to her mouth, horror and grief flooding through her. "I am so sorry," she whispered. Intoy shook his head slightly. "It was a long time ago, 10 years now. I left the tribe after that. I could not stay. Everywhere I looked, I saw her, heard her voice. I traveled. Lived among the whites for a time. Learned their language, their ways, but I never belonged there either. So now I live alone. I hunt, I trade, I survive. That is enough, is it?" Thea asked softly, "Is surviving really enough?" He looked at her then, really looked at her. And for a moment, something passed between them. An understanding, a recognition of shared grief. "No," he said finally, "but it is all I have." Thea reached out slowly, carefully, and placed her hand over his. Her pale skin stark against his darker complexion. "You have us now," she said. "At least for the next few days, you are not alone." Intoy stared at their joined hands for a long moment, then slowly, carefully. He turned his hand over and squeezed hers gently before pulling away. "Rest," he said, his voice rough. "We leave again in 2 hours. I will keep watch." Thea wanted to argue. wanted to insist that he needed rest too, but exhaustion was pulling at her like an undertow. She lay down beside her children, pulling them close. And within minutes she was asleep. Intoys watched them sleep, his expression unreadable. Then he turned his attention back to the narrow entrance to their shelter. His rifle across his knees, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. Any hint of danger. The sun climbed higher, bringing heat that drove away the night's cold, but not the sense of vulnerability that came with daylight. They were exposed now, visible, if the men from the wagon attack were looking for them. This would be when they were most at risk, but nothing moved on the desert floor. No riders appeared on the horizon. The hours passed slowly, marked only by the movement of shadows across stone when 2 hours had passed. Intoys gently shook Thea awake. She startled.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you.
Her hand reaching instinctively for the revolver before she remembered where she was, who she was with. Is it time? She asked, her voice thick with sleep. Yes, Intoy said. We need to move while the sun is high. The heat will be difficult, but we will have better visibility. We can see threats coming. They roused the children. Both groggy and reluctant, Faye whimpered softly, asking for her father before remembering he was gone. The sound cut through Thea like a knife. Tucker stood on shaky legs, trying to hide how sore he was, how much his body hurt from the previous night's march. Intoys offered them more dried meat and piñon nuts, along with water from a canteen that seemed impossibly full given how much they had all drunk from it. Thea did not ask where he had refilled it. She simply accepted it gratefully and made sure the children drank their fill before taking any for herself. How much farther? Tucker asked, his voice hoarse. A full day if we move steadily, Intoy said. We will reach the foothills by nightfall. There's a place there, an old line shack abandoned. We can shelter there and make the final approach to Silver Ridge in the morning. Will it be safe? Thea asked. Safer than the open desert, Intoys replied. But nowhere is truly safe until you are behind your brother's walls. They set out again, this time with the sun beating down on them, turning the desert into a furnace. The heat rose in visible waves, distorting the air, making distant objects shimmer and dance like mirages. Thea wrapped her shawl around her head and shoulders, trying to protect herself and Faye from the worst of it. Tucker walked with his head down, one foot in front of the other, mechanical, determined. Hours passed in a blur of heat and exhaustion. They stopped occasionally for water, for brief moments of rest in whatever shade they could find. But Intoys kept them moving, pushing them gently but firmly, always watching the horizon, always alert. It was mid-afternoon when they saw the riders. Intoys spotted them first, his hand coming up in a sharp gesture that froze Thea and Tucker in their tracks. Down, he hissed. Get down, do not move. They dropped immediately, Thea covering Faye with her body, Tucker pressing himself flat against the sand beside a clump of sagebrush. Intoys crouched low, his eyes fixed on the distant figures, 3 riders, moving slowly across the desert about a mile to their east. Too far to make out details, but close enough to be a threat. They seemed to be searching, sweeping back and forth in a pattern that suggested they were looking for something specific. Are they the same men? Thea whispered, her voice barely audible. I do not know, Intoy said, but we will not wait to find out. When they pass behind that outcropping, we move, quickly and quietly. There is a dry wash about 200 yards ahead. If we can reach it, we will be hidden from view. They waited, every second feeling like an eternity. Faye started to whimper, and Thea covered her daughter's mouth gently, whispering soothing sounds. Tucker's hand found the knife at his belt, his young face set in grim determination. The riders moved slowly, agonizingly slowly. Finally they disappeared behind a rock formation. Now, Intoy said, already moving, they ran. As much as they could run in their exhausted state. Thea carrying Faye, Tucker stumbling but keeping pace. Intoy's leading them in a crouch toward the dry wash. The sand grabbed at their feet, slowing them, making every step an effort. Thea's lungs burned, her legs screamed, but she did not stop. They reached the wash and tumbled into it. The depression was deeper than it looked, cutting 8 feet down into the desert floor. The bottom was lined with smooth stones and dried mud. Cracked into geometric patterns, they pressed themselves against the far wall, breathing hard, trying to stay silent, above them. The sound of hoofbeats, slow, steady, coming closer. Intoy pressed a finger to his lips. His other hand on his rifle, ready, Thea held Faye tight. One hand over the girl's mouth to keep her quiet. Tucker's eyes were wide, terrified. But he did not make a sound. The hoofbeats came closer. Closer, then stopped directly above them. Thea's heart hammered so hard she was certain the riders would hear it. Would look down and see them huddled there like animals in a trap. A man's voice, rough and irritated. Tracks end here. Damn wind covered everything. Another voice, younger, uncertain. You sure they came this way? I ain't sure of nothing, except that woman saw something she should not have seen, and my boss wants her dead before she reaches Silver Ridge and starts talking to the wrong people. What did she see? Don't matter what she saw, matters that she can't tell nobody about it. Now spread out. Check the washes. They gotta be holed up somewhere close. They can't have gone far, not with kids. The hoofbeats moved away, splitting in different directions. Thea looked at Intoy's, horror and confusion in her eyes. She started to speak, but he shook his head sharply. Not yet, not safe. They waited in the wash as the sun crawled across the sky. Waited as the riders searched, their voices occasionally drifting back. Frustrated, angry, waited until finally. After what felt like hours but was probably only one. The hoofbeats faded away entirely, moving back toward the east. Only then did Intoy allow himself to relax slightly. They will be back, he said quietly. They are not giving up. Whatever you saw, whatever you know. Someone wants you silenced badly enough to send men into the desert to hunt you down. Thea shook her head, bewildered. I do not understand. I did not see anything. There was nothing to see. We were just traveling. My husband died 6 months ago. My brother sent for us. We sold everything we had to pay for passage to Silver Ridge. There is no reason anyone would want to hurt us. Think, Intoy said. His voice urgent but calm. Before the attack. Before your wagon was overtaken, did you stop anywhere? Did you see anyone? Did your driver talk to anyone? Thea closed her eyes, thinking back, trying to remember through the fog of exhaustion and fear. We stopped at a way station, she said slowly. 2 days before the attack, to water the horses. There were other people there, cowboys, and some men in suits. They were arguing about something, land rights I think, mineral rights. Mr. Holloway told us to stay in the wagon. Said it was not our business, but I heard them. They were talking about claims being filed. About someone trying to steal territory that belonged to the railroad. Intoy nodded slowly. And one of those men saw your face, and decided you were a witness to something you should not have heard. But I do not even know what they were talking about, Thea protested. I know nothing about land claims or railroads. It does not matter what you know, Intoy said. It matters what they think you know. Or what they fear you might repeat to the wrong person. In Silver Ridge perhaps, to your brother, to the law. Thea felt sick. So they killed Mr. Holloway and tried to kill us because I might have overheard a conversation I did not even understand? Yes, Intoy said simply. That is how powerful men protect their secrets. They kill anyone who might threaten them, even if that threat is only a possibility. Tucker spoke up, his voice shaking but determined. Then we have to tell someone. We have to tell the law what happened. Those men cannot be allowed to just kill people. The law, Intoy said, his voice carrying a bitter edge, often serves whoever pays it the most. But you are right. If we can get you to Silver Ridge, if your brother is a good man with influence, perhaps something can be done. But first we have to survive long enough to get there. They climbed out of the wash carefully, checking in all directions before moving. The sun was lower now. The heat beginning to ease, they walked faster. Urgency replacing caution. Every moment in the open was a moment they could be spotted. By the time the sun touched the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red and purple, they had reached the foothills. The terrain changed here, becoming rockier, dotted with juniper and pinyon pine, offering more cover, more places to hide. Intoys led them up a narrow trail that switchbacked up the side of a low mesa. At the top, half hidden by scrub and fallen timber, was a small structure, little more than 4 walls and a roof. The line shack he had promised. The door hung crooked on leather hinges, one window was broken. The interior was thick with dust and the smell of old wood and animal droppings. But it was shelter, it was walls between them and the world. Thea nearly wept with relief. They settled in as the last light faded from the sky. Intoys built a tiny fire in the old stone hearth, just enough to provide warmth without sending up smoke that could be seen for miles. They ate the last of the dried meat and nuts, drank sparingly from the canteen. The children fell asleep almost immediately, curled together on a pile of old blankets Intoys had somehow procured from somewhere in the shack. Thea sat near the fire, her body aching, her mind racing. "Tomorrow we reach Silver Ridge," Intoy said, sitting down across from her, the firelight casting shadows across his angular face. "And then you leave," Thea said. "It was not a question." "That was our agreement," Intoys replied. "I get you safely to your brother, and then I go back to my life." "And I find you again," Thea said softly. "That was the promise." Intoys looked at her across the fire, his dark eyes reflecting the flames. "Why did you agree to that?" He asked. "You do not know me. You have no reason to seek me out once you are safe. Why make a promise you do not have to keep?" Thea was quiet for a long moment, searching for the right words. "Because," she said finally, "in the darkest moment of my life, when I thought we would die in that canyon, you appeared. You offered help when you did not have to. You asked for nothing in return except a promise that I would not forget you. How could I refuse that? How could I let you walk away believing you were forgettable?" Something in Intius's expression shifted, softened. "You are a strange woman, Thea Kingsley," he said. "And you are a strange man, Intoys," she replied. "But I think perhaps we understand each other better than most people ever do." The fire crackled between them. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines. And somewhere in the darkness, men were still searching, still hunting, but for this moment. In this small shelter on the side of a mesa, they were safe, and tomorrow, whatever came tomorrow, they would face it together. Dawn broke cold and clear over the foothills, the sky washing from black to pale gold, streaking the horizon with colors that promised a fair day. Intoys had not slept. He had kept watch through the night, his eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement, any indication that the riders had picked up their trail. But the night had remained quiet, empty except for the cry of owls and the distant yipping of coyotes. Thea woke to find him still sitting by the window, his profile silhouetted against the growing light. She sat up slowly, careful not to wake the children. Her body protested every movement, muscles stiff and aching from 2 days of hard travel. But there was no time for comfort, no luxury of rest. Today they would reach Silver Ridge. Today this journey would end. "Did you sleep at all?" she asked quietly. Intoy shook his head. "Someone needed to watch. You cannot keep going without rest," Thea said, concern evident in her voice. "I have gone longer," he replied. Finally turning to look at her, his face showed the strain. Lines of exhaustion around his eyes, but his gaze was still sharp. Still alert, we should leave soon. Before full light, the town is only 4 hours from here. Maybe 5 with the children. If we move quickly, we can be there by midday. Thea nodded, rising to wake Tucker and Faye. The children stirred reluctantly. Their small bodies as worn as her own, but they did not complain. They had learned in the past 2 days that complaining changed nothing. That survival required pushing past discomfort, past fear, past the part of you that wanted to simply stop and surrender. They ate a meager breakfast of the last dried berries and some water. Intoys had already packed what little they had, checking the revolver to ensure it was loaded. Counting the remaining bullets, still only 4. Not nearly enough if trouble found them. Stay close, he said as they stepped out into the morning air. The trail from here is more traveled. We may encounter other people. If we do, let me speak first. Say nothing about what happened, about the attack. Trust no one until we are safely with your brother. The descent from the mesa was easier than the climb had been. The trail winding down through stands of juniper and pinyon. The air smelled of pine resin and sage, clean and sharp, as they walked. The landscape gradually changed, becoming less wild, less empty. They began to see signs of human habitation. A fence line in the distance, the remains of an old campfire. Wheel ruts from wagons that had passed this way before. Tucker walked beside Intoys now. His earlier suspicion replaced by something closer to admiration. The boy asked questions in a low voice. About tracking, about reading signs in the earth. About how to move quietly through the brush. Intoys answered patiently, teaching without seeming to teach. Passing on knowledge in the way his own grandfather had taught him. Faye rode on Thea's back again, but she was awake now. Her blue eyes taking in everything. Occasionally she would point at a bird or an unusual rock formation and whisper questions to her mother. Soft and wondering, Thea answered as best she could. Grateful that her daughter could still find beauty in the world after everything they had endured. They had been walking for perhaps 2 hours when they saw the smoke. It rose in a thin column from beyond a low ridge. Gray against the blue sky, too much smoke for a campfire. Too controlled to be a wildfire. Intoys raised his hand, signaling them to stop. His eyes narrowed as he studied the smoke. Calculating distance, direction, threat, what is it? Thea asked. A ranch, maybe a homestead, Intoys said. The smoke is from a chimney. Someone cooking breakfast. The question is whether we go around or risk contact. What do you think? Thea asked. Intoys was quiet for a moment. Weighing options. We are close to Silver Ridge now. Close enough that people here will know your brother if he is established in the area. It might be worth asking for directions, making sure we are going the right way. But it is a risk. Thea looked at her children. At Tucker's determined face and Faye's tired eyes. I trust your judgment, she said. They approached carefully, Intoys in the lead. His hand never far from his rifle. As they crested the ridge they saw it. A small ranch house well maintained with a barn and corral. Several horses grazed in a fenced pasture. Chickens pecked in the yard, smoke rose from the stone chimney. And a man stood on the porch, watching them approach. He was older, perhaps 60, with gray hair and a full beard. He wore work clothes and boots. A rifle leaned against the porch rail within easy reach. His weathered face was cautious, but not hostile. The face of a man who had learned to be careful, but had not yet learned to be cruel. Morning, he called out as they came into the yard. His eyes moving from Intoys to Thea to the children. Taking in their worn appearance, their exhaustion. You folks look like you have traveled a long way. We have, Thea said, stepping forward slightly. We are heading to Silver Ridge, to the Kingsley Ranch. My brother James Kingsley owns land there. The man's expression shifted. Recognition and something else, surprise perhaps. James Kingsley is your brother? He asked. Yes, Thea said, hope rising in her chest. Do you know him? Can you tell us how much farther? The man glanced at Intoy's, wariness flickering across his face. I know him, good man. Honest rancher, but miss, there is something you should know. Thea's heart clenched. What? What is wrong? There was trouble in town 2 days ago, the man said slowly. Some business with land claims and railroad surveyors. Your brother was in the middle of it. He challenged some men who were trying to file claims on territory that included Apache hunting grounds. Said it was illegal, said he had proof the surveys were fraudulent. Intoy stepped forward, his voice sharp. What happened? The man looked at him directly for the first time. Really seeing him, recognition dawning. You are Apache, he said. Not a question, I am, Intoy replied. And I want to know what happened to James Kingsley. He is alive, the man said quickly. But he is in trouble, the men he challenged. They work for the Territorial Development Company. Powerful people with connections to the governor's office. They accused him of inciting violence, of threatening legal surveyors. The sheriff arrested him 3 days ago. He's being held pending a hearing. Thea felt the ground tilt beneath her. Arrested? But he did nothing wrong. He was trying to stop them from stealing land. I believe you, the man said, his voice sympathetic. And most folks in Silver Ridge believe it too. James Kingsley is well respected. But the men he crossed, they have money and lawyers. They are making sure the legal process goes their way. Then I will speak for him, Thea said, her voice firm despite the fear coursing through her. I will tell them what I heard at the way station, about the fraudulent claims. About the men who killed our driver to silence us. The man's eyes widened. Someone tried to kill you? They did more than try, Thea said. They murdered the man who was driving our wagon. They would have killed us too if not for Intoy's. We barely escaped. The rancher looked between them, understanding dawning. Then you need to get to town quickly. If you can testify about what you heard, it might be enough to help your brother. The hearing is scheduled for tomorrow morning. Can you tell us the fastest way? Intoy asked. The man pointed north. Follow the fence line for about 2 miles. You will hit the main road into Silver Ridge. From there it is maybe another hour on foot. But miss, he looked at Thea seriously, you need to be careful. If those men tried to kill you once, they will try again. Especially if you plan to testify against them. I do not care, Thea said, her voice hard. They killed an innocent man. They tried to kill my children. I will not let them destroy my brother too. The rancher nodded slowly. You are brave, I respect that. Wait here a moment. He disappeared into the house. Returning a few minutes later with a bundle wrapped in cloth. Food, he said, handing it to Thea. Bread, some cheese, dried apples. It is not much, but it will help. And this, he handed her a folded piece of paper. It is a note to Sheriff Coulter. He is a good man, honest. But he is under pressure from powerful people. This note explains that I have met you. That I believe your story, it might help. Thea took the offerings with tears in her eyes. Thank you, you do not know what this means. I know what it means to stand against powerful men, the rancher said quietly. I know it takes courage. Go now, get to town. Find the sheriff before anyone else finds you. They left quickly, following his directions along the fence line. The food he had given them felt like a fortune. They stopped briefly to eat. The bread was fresh, the cheese sharp and good. For a few minutes they allowed themselves to simply eat. To taste something other than dried meat and desperation. As they walked, Tucker stayed close to Thea now. His earlier bravado replaced by visible worry. Mama, he said quietly, what if they do not believe you? What if the bad men hurt Uncle James? Thea knelt down so she was at eye level with her son. Then we will fight harder, she said. Your uncle is a good man. He stood up for what was right, even though it put him in danger. We will do the same. We will tell the truth and trust that justice will prevail. But what if it does not? Tucker asked, his voice small. Thea pulled him close. Then we will still know we did the right thing, and that matters, Tucker. It matters that we stand up for what is right, even when it is hard. Even when we are afraid. Intoys watched this exchange silently. Something tightening in his chest. He had forgotten what it was like to be part of something. To care about people beyond simple survival. To feel responsible, not just for keeping them alive, but for keeping them whole. For protecting not just their bodies but their spirits. The fence line ended at a wider road, rutted with wagon tracks and showing signs of regular traffic. This was the main route into Silver Ridge. They could see the town in the distance now. A cluster of buildings nestled in a valley, smoke rising from multiple chimneys. The church steeple visible above the other structures. We should be careful from here, Intoys said. Stay alert if you see the men from the desert. If you see anyone who looks like they might be searching for you, tell me immediately. They walked along the road, passing a few other travelers, a farmer with a wagon full of hay, a pair of cowboys heading out to check fence lines. People glanced at them curiously. At the Apache man traveling with the white woman and children. But no one stopped them, no one challenged them. As they drew closer to town, Thea felt her heart begin to race. This was it, the end of their journey. Safety was so close now. Just a few more minutes, just a little farther. But safety also meant that Intoys would leave, would return to his solitary life in the hills, would disappear from her life as suddenly as he had entered it. She found herself slowing her pace, reluctant to reach the destination, even though every part of her wanted to collapse into her brother's arms, wanted to feel safe again, wanted to stop running. Intoys noticed her hesitation. What is wrong? He asked. Nothing, Thea said quickly. Then more honestly, everything. I do not know. I want to reach my brother. I want this nightmare to be over. But I also, she trailed off, unsure how to finish the sentence. You also do not want to say goodbye, Intoys finished for her. Thea looked at him, surprised by his directness. Yes, she admitted. Is that foolish? You are a stranger. We have known each other for barely 2 days. I should be grateful for your help and let you go. But instead I find myself wishing we had longer. Wishing I knew you better. Wishing. She stopped, aware she was saying too much. Intoys was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes studying her face. It is not foolish, he said finally. In crisis, we see people more clearly than we might in years of ordinary life. You have seen me at my best and my worst. I have seen the same in you. That creates a bond, whether we want it to or not. And do you want it to? Thea asked softly, before Intoys could answer. Faye tugged on her mother's skirt. Mama, look. They followed her pointing finger to see a group of men on horseback entering the town from the east side. Even from this distance, even without being able to see their faces clearly, something about them made Intoys tense. Get off the road, he said urgently. Into the trees now. They moved quickly, stepping off the road and into a stand of cottonwoods that offered cover. Intoys positioned them behind a thick trunk, his hand on his rifle, watching as the riders came closer. There were 5 of them now. Not 3, all armed, all moving with purpose. As they passed their hiding spot, Thea caught a glimpse of their faces, hard men. The kind who had seen violence and were comfortable with it. One of them wore a badge, a deputy perhaps, or someone pretending to be one. Those are the men from the way station, Thea whispered urgently. I recognized 2 of them. They were arguing with the men in suits about the land claims. Intoys nodded grimly. They are going into town. Probably to make sure your brother stays in jail. To intimidate anyone who might speak in his defense. Then what do we do? Thea asked. We wait until they are settled. until they think they are safe. Then we find the sheriff, we tell him everything. And we make sure those men do not leave town free, Intoy said. His voice carrying a hard edge Thea had not heard before. Tucker looked up at him. Will there be a fight? Intoy looked at the boy seriously. Maybe, but if there is, you and your sister will be somewhere safe, I promise you that. They waited in the trees as the riders disappeared into town, watching as the streets slowly returned to normal, people going about their business, unaware of the drama unfolding around them. When enough time had passed, Intoy finally nodded. We go now, he said. We stay together, we stay alert, and we do not stop until we find the sheriff. They emerged from the trees and entered Silver Ridge. The town was larger than Thea had expected. A proper settlement with a main street lined with businesses. A hotel, a general store, a saloon. The sheriff's office was halfway down the street.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story.
A sturdy building with bars on the windows and a sign hang over the door. As they approached, Thea felt her breath coming faster, her heart pounding. This was it, the moment everything would either come together or fall apart. She reached out and took Intius's hand, needing the contact, needing to feel that she was not alone. He squeezed her hand once, gently, then released it as they reached the door. Ready? He asked. Thea nodded. Ready. Intoy pushed open the door, and they stepped inside. Into shadow, into uncertainty, into whatever came next. The office was dim after the bright sunlight outside. It took a moment for Thea's eyes to adjust when they did. She saw a man sitting behind a desk, middle-aged. With tired eyes and a thick mustache, he looked up as they entered, his expression shifting from boredom to surprise to wariness in the space of a heartbeat. Can I help you folks? He asked, his hand moving subtly toward the gun on his hip. Thea stepped forward, her voice stronger than she felt. Sheriff Coulter? My name is Thea Kingsley. James Kingsley is my brother. And I need to tell you about a murder. Sheriff Coulter's hand froze halfway to his gun, his eyes moving from Thea's determined face to Intoy standing quietly behind her, then down to the two exhausted children clinging to their mother's skirts. Slowly, deliberately, he moved his hand away from the weapon and gestured to the chairs in front of his desk. You better sit down, Mrs. Kingsley, he said, his voice carefully neutral. And tell me everything from the beginning. Thea remained standing, her body trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline. My brother is innocent, she said. Whatever those men told you, whatever charges they filed, James did nothing wrong. He was trying to stop a crime, and they arrested him to silence him. Those are serious accusations, Coulter said, leaning back in his chair. You are talking about representatives of the Territorial Development Company. Men with legal authority to survey and file claims. Men with fraudulent documents and blood on their hands, Thea countered, pulling the folded note from her pocket and placing it on his desk. Samuel Pritchard sent this. He will vouch for us. He told us what happened to James, and I can tell you what happened to us. Coulter unfolded the note. Read it quickly, his expression hardening slightly. He looked up at Intoy. You are Apache, he stated. I am, Intoy replied calmly. My name is Intoy. I found Mrs. Kingsley and her children in the desert 3 nights ago. They had been attacked, their driver murdered. I brought them here because it was the right thing to do. Attacked by who? Coulter asked, his attention sharpening. Thea stepped closer to the desk, her voice urgent now. 3 days ago we stopped at a way station to water the horses. There were men there arguing about land surveys and mineral rights. They were saying things about falsified claims, about stealing Apache territory. Our driver told us to stay quiet, to mind our own business, but I heard them. I saw their faces. She paused, gathering herself. 2 days later, 3 riders attacked our wagon. They shot Mr. Holloway without warning. Killed him where he sat. The horses bolted. The wagon overturned. We ran. If Intoys had not found us, if he had not protected us, my children and I would be dead right now. Coulter was quiet for a long moment, his weathered face unreadable. Can you identify these men? He asked finally. 2 of them, Thea said. I saw them clearly at the way station. And I saw them again this morning, riding into town with 3 others. One of them wore a deputy's badge. The sheriff's jaw tightened. That would be Clayton Moss. He is not my deputy. He works for the Territorial Marshal's office, or so he claims. I have had my doubts about him for months now. Then you believe me? Thea asked, hope flooding through her. Coulter stood slowly, walking to the window and looking out at the street. Mrs. Kingsley, I want to believe you. Your brother is a good man, one of the best I have known. When he came to me 3 weeks ago with evidence that the land surveys were fraudulent, I wanted to help him, but the men he accused have powerful friends. Friends who made it very clear that interfering would cost me my job. Maybe my life, so you arrested him instead, Thea said, her voice sharp with accusation. I arrested him to keep him alive, Coulter snapped, turning to face her. The night before I took him into custody, someone shot through his ranch house window, missed him by inches. I put him in a cell with bars and locked doors because it was the only way I could protect him from men who operate outside the law while pretending to uphold it. The anger drained from Thea's face, replaced by understanding. I am sorry, she said quietly. I did not know. Most people do not, Coulter said, his voice weary. They see the badge and think it means I have power. But power only exists when the law matters, and out here, on the frontier, the law often takes a backseat to money and influence. Then what can we do? Thea asked. There must be something. Some way to help James to stop these men. Coulter returned to his desk, sitting heavily. The hearing is tomorrow morning. Judge from Santa Fe, supposed to be impartial. If you testify about what you heard at the way station, about the attack on your wagon, it might be enough to cast doubt on the company's claims. Might be enough to get your brother released and the surveys investigated properly, but Intoys interjected, sensing the unspoken caveat. But the moment you walk into that courtroom, you become a target, Coulter said bluntly. The men who tried to kill you once will try again. And this time they will not be subtle about it. They cannot afford to let you speak. Tucker stepped forward, his young voice fierce. Then we will fight them. We will not let them hurt Mama or Uncle James. Coulter looked at the boy with something like respect. You have your uncle's courage, son. But courage is not always enough. It will have to be, Thea said firmly. I am not running anymore. I am not hiding. Tomorrow morning, I will walk into that courtroom and I will tell the truth. Whatever happens after that, at least I will know I did the right thing. Intoys had been silent through most of this exchange. But now he spoke, his voice quiet but carrying weight. Where is James Kingsley being held? Coulter gestured toward a door at the back of the office. In the cells, 2 rooms back. Why? I would like to see him, Intoys said. I would like to meet the man who was willing to stand up for my people's land when his own kind would not. The sheriff considered this, then nodded slowly. All right, but just you, Mrs. Kingsley. You and the children should rest. There's a boarding house 2 doors down, run by a widow named Martha Brennan. Tell her I sent you. She will give you a room and ask no questions. Thea wanted to protest, wanted to see her brother immediately. But exhaustion was pulling at her like an undertow. And the children needed rest, needed safety. Thank you, she said. We will go there now. Coulter stood and pulled a key ring from his belt, handing 1 key to Thea. Room 3, top of the stairs. Martha keeps it for emergencies. You will be safe there tonight. I will post a deputy outside. A real one, someone I trust. As Thea turned to leave, she looked back at Intoys. Something unspoken passing between them. "Will you come find me?" she asked, "after you speak with James?" "Yes," Intoys said simply, and she believed him. The boarding house was exactly as Coulter had described it, clean, quiet. Run by a sharp-eyed woman who asked no questions when Thea mentioned the sheriff's name. Martha Brennan showed them to a room with 2 beds, clean linens, and a basin of fresh water. To Thea, it looked like paradise. The children collapsed onto one bed immediately, asleep almost before their heads touched the pillows. Thea sat on the edge of the other bed, suddenly unable to move. The weight of the past 3 days crashing down on her all at once. She had kept herself together through sheer force of will. But now, in this quiet room with her children safe, the walls she had built began to crumble. She wept silently, her shoulders shaking. Tears streaming down her face. Tears for Mr. Holloway, who had died trying to protect them. Tears for the terror her children had endured. Tears for James sitting in a cell because he had tried to do the right thing. Tears for herself, for the widow she had become. For the desperate woman fleeing across the desert with everything she owned in a broken wagon. She did not hear the soft knock on the door at first. When it came again, she wiped her face quickly and stood, opening the door to find Intoys standing in the hallway, his dark eyes taking in her tear-stained face, the exhaustion written in every line of her body. "May I come in?" he asked quietly. Thea nodded, stepping aside. Intoys entered, glancing at the sleeping children before turning his attention back to her. "Your brother is a remarkable man," he said. "He asked about you first, before anything else. Wanted to know if you were safe, if the children were harmed. Only after I assured him you were all alive did he ask anything else." "That sounds like James," Thea said, a small smile touching her lips despite everything. "He told me about the surveys," Intoys continued. "About how he discovered the boundary markers had been moved. How entire sections of treaty land were being illegally claimed. He's been gathering evidence for months, working with tribal leaders, with honest surveyors, trying to build a case that could not be ignored. And they arrested him for it," Thea said bitterly. "They arrested him because he was effective," Intoys corrected. "Because he was close to exposing something that powerful men wanted to keep hidden. Your testimony tomorrow could be the final piece. The evidence that breaks their case apart." Thea moved to the window. Looking out at the street below, the sun was setting, painting the buildings in shades of gold and orange. "I am frightened," she admitted quietly. "Not for myself, but for my children. If something happens to me, if those men succeed in silencing me, what becomes of Tucker and Faye?" Intoys crossed the room to stand beside her. "Nothing will happen to you," he said, his voice carrying absolute certainty. "You cannot promise that," Thea said, turning to look at him. "You cannot control what those men will do." "No," Intoys agreed, "but I can stand between you and them. I can make sure that if they want to hurt you, they will have to go through me first." Thea felt her breath catch. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you do that? You have already done so much. You brought us here safely. You fulfilled your promise. You could leave now. Go back to your life in the hills. Why risk yourself further for people you barely know?" Intoys was quiet for a long moment, his gaze holding hers. "Because in 3 days you have reminded me of something I thought I had forgotten," he said finally. "You have reminded me what it feels like to care about someone other than myself. What it feels like to have something worth protecting, worth fighting for. I thought that part of me died with my wife. But it did not. It was only sleeping. And you woke it up." Thea felt tears threatening again. But these were different. Not tears of grief or fear, but of something else. Something she could not quite name. "I made you a promise," she said softly, "that I would find you again after this was over. But what if I do not want to wait? What if I want you to stay?" "Then I will stay," Intoys said. his hand reaching up to cup her face gently, his thumb brushing away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "For as long as you want me, I will stay." The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility, with the recognition of something rare and unexpected growing in the space where fear and exhaustion had been. Slowly, carefully, Thea leaned forward, and Intoys met her halfway, their lips touching in a kiss that was gentle and tentative and full of promise. When they pulled apart, both were breathing harder. Thea's hand had come up to rest against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. "Stay tonight," she whispered. "Not here in this room, but close. Stay close so I know you are real. So I know this is not just some dream born of desperation." "I will be right outside your door," Intoys promised. "No one will reach you without going through me first." He left then quietly, and Thea heard him settle on the floor in the hallway. Heard the soft sound of him checking his rifle, preparing for a long night of vigilance. She lay down on the bed beside her children, pulling them close. And for the first time in 3 days, she felt something close to peace. But across town, in a back room of the saloon, 5 men sat around a table, their faces hard in the lamplight. Clayton Moss, the false deputy, poured whiskey into dirty glasses and spoke in a voice rough with tobacco and malice. "She is here," he said. "Saw her walk into Coulter's office this afternoon with that Apache and the brats. She is planning to testify tomorrow, to tell everything she heard at the way station. Then she does not leave this town alive," another man said. Older, better dressed, clearly the one in charge. "I do not care how you do it. Make it look like an accident. Make it look like the Apache did it. I do not care. But that woman does not walk into that courtroom tomorrow morning. What about the sheriff?" Moss asked. "Coulter is not stupid. He will have her protected." "Coulter is one man with a badge that means nothing," the well-dressed man said. "We are 5 men with guns and no conscience. The odds are in our favor. And if we fail?" Another asked. "We will not fail," came the cold reply. "Too much money is at stake. Too many powerful people are depending on those land claims going through. If that means a woman and 2 children have to disappear, then that is a small price to pay." They drank then, sealing their agreement in whiskey and wickedness. Outside the saloon, the town continued its evening routine, unaware of the violence being planned in its midst, unaware that tomorrow would bring not justice but blood. In the boarding house, Intoys sat with his back against Thea's door, his rifle across his knees, his eyes open and watchful. He had heard the men enter the saloon hours ago, had seen the way they moved. Purposeful and dangerous, he knew they would come. Knew that tonight or tomorrow they would make their move. And when they did, he would be ready. The night deepened, the town grew quiet. And in the darkness, 2 forces prepared for collision. One driven by greed and fear of exposure, the other by justice and the fierce protection of the innocent. Before the sun rose again, before the courtroom doors opened, blood would be spilled, but whose blood and how much? Only the coming dawn would reveal. The attack came 2 hours before dawn. In that deep darkness when the world holds its breath between night and morning, when even the most vigilant guards feel the pull of sleep. But Intoys had not slept, had not allowed himself even a moment of rest. He heard them coming before they reached the boarding house. The soft creak of leather, the whisper of boots on wood, the tiny metallic click of a hammer being pulled back. He rose silently, moving away from Thea's door and into the shadows at the end of the hallway. His rifle ready, his breathing controlled. They came up the stairs carefully, 3 of them, trying to be quiet but failing in the way men who spend most of their time on horseback always fail when they try to move with stealth on foot. The first man reached the top of the stairs, saw the empty hallway, the closed door of room 3. He gestured to the others. They spread out, one moving toward the door while the other 2 provided cover. Intoys waited until they were committed. until they had moved past his position. Then he stepped out of the shadows. "You are looking for someone," he said quietly. The three men spun, guns coming up, but Intoy's was faster. His rifle barked once in the confined space, deafeningly loud. The first man went down with a bullet through his shoulder. Screaming, the other two fired wildly, their shots going high as panic took them. Intoy's dropped low, rolled, came up firing again. The second man took a bullet in the leg and fell, cursing. The third man, smarter or more experienced, did not fire. Instead he ran back down the stairs, his boots thundering on the wood. Intoy's let him go. He could not pursue without leaving Thea and the children unprotected. Doors were opening along the hallway. People emerging in nightclothes, shouting questions, demanding to know what was happening. Thea's door flew open. She stood there with the revolver in her hand, her face pale but determined. Behind her, Tucker held his knife, trying to look brave, trying to protect his mother and sister. Faye was crying, her small hands over her ears. "Are you hurt?" Thea asked urgently, her eyes scanning Intoy's for injuries. "I am fine," he said, "but we need to move now. The one who ran will bring others. We cannot stay here." Sheriff Coulter appeared at the top of the stairs, his gun drawn, his deputy behind him. He took in the scene quickly, the two wounded men on the floor, Intoy's with his smoking rifle, Thea and her children in the doorway. "What happened?" Coulter demanded. "They came to kill her," Intoy said flatly. "To make sure she could not testify, I stopped them." Coulter moved to the wounded men, recognizing them both. Clay Rawlings and Pete Murdoch, both work for the Territorial Development Company. He looked up at Intoy's. "You said 3? "The third one ran," Intoy's replied. "Then they know their attack failed," Coulter said grimly. "They will come in force now, probably before dawn. We need to get Mrs. Kingsley and the children somewhere safer." "Where?" Thea asked. "If they found us here, they will find us anywhere in town." "The church," Martha Brennan said, appearing in her doorway, her gray hair in a braid, a shotgun in her hands. "Father Domingo will give you sanctuary. Even those devils will think twice before attacking a house of God." Coulter nodded. "Martha is right. Gather your things quickly. We leave in 5 minutes." They moved fast, Thea bundling the children in their coats, grabbing the few possessions they had. Intoy's reloaded his rifle, his face grim. He had killed before, but never like this, never in defense of people he had come to care about. The weight of it sat differently on his shoulders. They left through the back door of the boarding house, moving through dark alleys and between buildings, avoiding the main street. Coulter led the way, his deputy bringing up the rear. Martha Brennan had gone ahead to wake the priest, to prepare sanctuary. The church stood on a small hill at the edge of town. White painted wood with a bell tower and stained glass windows that would glow, beautiful in daylight, but now were dark and mysterious. Father Domingo waited at the door, an older man with kind eyes and silver hair. He ushered them inside without question, locking the heavy wooden door behind them. "You will be safe here," he said in accented English. "This is God's house. No violence may be done here. God's house has been violated before," Coulter said quietly. "We need to prepare for the possibility that these men do not respect the sanctuary." The priest's expression hardened. "Then they will answer to more than earthly law," he said, moving to a cabinet and removing a long rifle, old but well-maintained. "I was a soldier before I was a priest. I have not forgotten how to protect my flock." They positioned themselves strategically, Coulter and his deputy at the front windows, Intoy's at the back door, the priest in the bell tower where he could see anyone approaching. Thea and the children were taken to a small room behind the altar, hidden, protected by thick walls and locked doors. "Stay here," Intoy's told Thea, his hand on her shoulder. "No matter what you hear, no matter what happens, you stay here with the children. Do you understand?" "I understand," Thea said. But her hand caught his, holding tight. "Intoy's, if something happens to you, if you do not come back, I will come back," he interrupted gently. I made you a promise, remember? I do not break my promises. He kissed her then, hard and fierce. A kiss that tasted of fear and determination and something deeper. Something that had no name yet, but was growing stronger with every moment they spent together. When he pulled away, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. Go, she whispered. Do what you must do, but come back to me. He left. Returning to his position at the back door, the night was quiet now, too quiet. The kind of silence that comes before violence, before the world breaks open and spills blood. He checked his rifle again. Counted his remaining bullets, 8, not enough if they came in force, but enough to make them pay dearly for whatever they tried. The attack came with the first light of dawn, pale gray touching the eastern sky. They came from 3 directions. More than a dozen men, some on horseback, others on foot, they surrounded the church, weapons drawn. Their intentions clear. Clayton Moss stood at the front, still wearing his false badge, his voice carrying in the morning air. Sheriff Coulter. Send out the woman. This does not need to end in bloodshed. We just want to talk to her, to clear up some misunderstandings. The only misunderstanding, Coulter shouted back from inside, is you thinking I am stupid enough to believe that. Thea Kinsley is under my protection. She will testify at the hearing in 2 hours. If you want to challenge her testimony, you can do it in court like civilized men. The hearing is not going to happen. Moss replied. Judge Blackwell received urgent business in Santa Fe. He left last night. There will be no hearing today, no testimony, which means you have no reason to keep that woman. So send her out now and we will forget this whole mess. In the bell tower, Father Domingo's voice rang out, strong and clear. You stand on holy ground, threatening violence in the house of the Lord. Leave now while you still have souls worth saving. Moss laughed, ugly and harsh. Stay out of this. Priest, this is business, not religion. All life is God's business. The priest replied, and then his rifle spoke. The shot kicking up dirt at Moss's feet. The next one will not miss. For a moment, everything froze. Then chaos erupted. The men outside opened fire, bullets slamming into the church walls, shattering windows, splintering wood. Coulter and his deputy returned fire, aiming carefully, making each shot count. 2 men went down in the first volley, wounded but not dead. At the back door, 3 men tried to force their way in. Intoys met them with rifle fire. Dropping the first one immediately, the other 2 scattered. Taking cover behind headstones in the small cemetery, they fired at him and he returned fire. A deadly game of hide and seek among the graves. Inside the hidden room, Thea held her children close, her hands over their ears, trying to muffle the sound of gunfire, trying to keep them from understanding the violence happening just beyond the walls. Tucker was crying now, trying to be brave but failing. Faye had gone silent, her eyes wide and glassy with shock. It will be over soon, Thea whispered, not knowing if it was true, not knowing if any of them would survive to see the sun fully rise. It will be over soon and we will be safe. Outside, Moss was screaming orders, directing his men to concentrate their fire, to break down the defenses, to overwhelm the church through sheer volume of bullets. The walls were thick but not impenetrable. Splinters were flying, glass was shattering. It was only a matter of time before someone inside was hit. That someone was Coulter's deputy. A young man named Tom Brewster. He took a bullet through the shoulder and went down hard, blood spreading across his shirt. Coulter dragged him away from the window, pressing cloth against the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. Hold on. Tom, he said urgently, just hold on. At the back, Intoys was running low on ammunition. He had dropped 2 more men, but there were still at least 3 trying to flank the church, trying to find a way in. He made a decision, a dangerous one but necessary. He could not let them breach the back door, could not let them reach Thea and the children. He opened the door and stepped out, moving fast, using the headstones for cover. His rifle firing methodically. One of the men went down, then another. The third saw him coming and tried to run, but Intoys was faster. He caught the man before he could reach his horse, slammed the rifle stock into his temple, dropping him unconscious to the ground. But the move had exposed him from the front of the church. Moss saw him, raised his revolver, fired 3 times in rapid succession. Intoys felt the first bullet tear through his side, felt the second graze his arm, felt the third miss entirely. He stumbled, went down on one knee, his rifle falling from suddenly weak fingers. From the bell tower, Father Domingo saw it happen, saw Intoys fall, saw Moss moving in to finish him. The old priest's rifle cracked once. Precise and deadly, Moss went down with a bullet through his chest, his eyes wide with surprise, his false badge glinting in the dawn light. The other men, seeing their leader fall, seeing how many of their companions were wounded or dead, began to break, began to run. Some mounted horses and fled. Others simply threw down their weapons and raised their hands in surrender within minutes. It was over. The gunfire faded to silence, replaced by the moans of wounded men and the ringing echoes in everyone's ears. Thea heard the silence, felt it like a physical presence. She waited, counting heartbeats, waiting to know if Intoys was alive or dead, waiting to know if she had lost another man she cared about to violence and greed. Then the door to her hiding place opened, and Sheriff Coulter stood there, his face grim, blood on his shirt. "Is it over?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "It is over," Coulter confirmed. "The men who attacked us are dead or captured. You are safe now, your children are safe." "And Intoys?" Thea asked, standing, her heart in her throat. Coulter's expression softened slightly. "He is alive. But he is wounded. He needs a doctor." Thea did not wait to hear more. She pushed past Coulter, running through the church, bursting out the back door into the cemetery where she found Intoys sitting propped against a headstone, his hand pressed to his side where blood seeped through his fingers. His face was pale, but his eyes were open, aware. When he saw her coming, he tried to smile. "I told you I would come back," he said, his voice weak but steady. Thea dropped to her knees beside him, her hands replacing his over the wound, pressing hard to stop the bleeding. "You fool," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You beautiful, brave, impossible fool. You could have been killed." "But I was not," Intoys replied, his hand coming up to touch her face, leaving a smear of blood on her cheek. "I kept my promise. I protected you. I came back." "The doctor is coming," Coulter said from behind them. "Tom rode to get him. He will be here in minutes. Intoys will be fine. The wounds look worse than they are." Thea did not take her eyes off Intoys, did not stop pressing against his wound, did not stop crying. "You are not leaving me," she said fiercely. "Do you hear me? You are not allowed to leave me. I have lost too much already. I will not lose you too. Then I will not leave." Intoys said simply, "I will stay with you for as long as you want me, for as long as life allows." The doctor arrived, a competent man with steady hands and a no-nonsense manner. He examined Intoys quickly, cleaned and bandaged the wounds, pronounced that he would live with rest and proper care. They carried him into the church, laid him on a pew cushioned with blankets. Thea sat beside him, holding his hand, refusing to move. Hours passed. The sun rose fully, washing the world in golden light. Sheriff Coulter rounded up the surviving attackers, took statements, sent telegrams to Santa Fe detailing what had happened. The judge, it turned out, had not left town at all, had been detained by the very men who claimed he had urgent business elsewhere. When he arrived at the church and heard the full story, saw the evidence, heard Thea's testimony, his face hardened with anger. "These men will answer for their crimes," Judge Blackwell declared. "Every single one of them. And the Territorial Development Company will be investigated thoroughly. Their land claims will be frozen pending review. Justice may be slow, Mrs. Kingsley, but it will come." James Kingsley was released from his cell within the hour. He came to the church immediately, sweeping his sister into a fierce embrace. Both of them crying, both of them holding tight to family that had survived against impossible odds. Tucker and Faye clung to their uncle, who they had never met before, but who felt instantly familiar. Like safety, like home. "Thank you," James said to Intoz, who was sitting up now, color returning to his face. "Thank you for bringing them to me safely. Thank you for protecting them when I could not. She is worth protecting," Intoy said simply, looking at Thea. James followed his gaze. Saw the way his sister looked at the Apache warrior. Saw the way their hands were intertwined. Saw something he had not seen in her eyes since her husband died. Hope, possibility, the future opening up instead of closing down. "You are welcome in my home," James said to Intoys. "For as long as you wish to stay, you saved my sister's life. My niece and nephew's lives. You helped expose corruption that would have cost my people and yours dearly. You have earned more than just my gratitude. You have earned my respect. My friendship." Intoys nodded, accepting the offer, accepting the hand James extended. "I may take you up on that," he said, glancing at Thea. "I find I have reasons to stay that I did not have before." As the afternoon sun slanted through the stained glass windows, painting the church interior in jeweled colors, Thea sat beside Intoys, her children playing quietly nearby under their uncle's watchful eye. The violence of the morning felt distant now, unreal, like something from a nightmare that fades in daylight. "What happens now?" Thea asked softly. "Now we heal," Intoys replied. "Now we rest. Now we figure out what comes next together." "Together," Thea repeated, testing the word, finding she liked the sound of it, like the promise it held. "I think I could get used to that." "So could I," Intoys said, squeezing her hand gently. Outside, Silver Ridge continued its daily business, unaware that the future had just shifted, that corruption had been exposed, that justice was finally within reach. Unaware that in the small white church on the hill, two people who had been strangers 4 days ago had found something neither had been looking for, but both desperately needed. They had found each other, and in finding each other, they had found hope. 3 months had passed since the gunfight at the church. Since the morning that had changed everything, spring had come to the territory, bringing green to the hillsides and wildflowers to the meadows, bringing warmth after the long cold of winter, bringing new beginnings to people who had survived the darkness. The Kingsley Ranch sprawled across a valley north of Silver Ridge, good land with water and grass, with mountains rising in the distance like sentinels. James had built it with his own hands over 5 years. Every fence post, every board of the barn, every stone of the house foundation, and now it held more than just him. Now it held family. Thea stood on the porch in the early morning light, watching Tucker help his uncle mend a section of fence while Faye scattered grain for the chickens. Her daughter's laughter carrying across the yard, bright and carefree in a way that still made Thea's heart ache with gratitude. The children had healed faster than she had expected. Their resilience, a gift she had not known they possessed. Tucker no longer woke screaming from nightmares. Faye no longer flinched at sudden noises. They were becoming themselves again, becoming whole, behind her. The door opened and Intoy stepped out, moving carefully, his side still tender where the bullet had torn through. But healing, growing stronger every day, he had stayed, just as he promised, had taken one of the small cabins on the ranch property, had made himself useful in 100 quiet ways, mending tack, tracking lost cattle, teaching Tucker how to read signs in the earth, how to move quietly through the forest, how to respect the land and the creatures that lived on it. He moved to stand beside her, his presence solid and comforting. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the children, watching the sun climb higher, painting the world in gold. "I need to go into town today," Thea said finally. "Martha Brennan asked me to help her with the church social, and I promised Father Domingo I would bring preserves for the pantry." "I will ride with you," Intoy said. "You do not have to," Thea replied, though she was glad he offered. "The men who attacked us are in prison. The company has been dissolved. We are safe now." "I know," Intoy said, But I want to go with you anyway, not because you need protection, but because I enjoy your company." Thea smiled, reaching for his hand, their fingers intertwining naturally, easily the way they had begun to do without thinking, without question. "Then I would be happy to have you with me." They prepared the wagon, loading it with jars of preserves and fresh bread. Faye insisted on coming along, climbing into the back with her favorite doll. Tucker chose to stay with James, more interested in ranch work than town visits, as they rolled down the road towards Silver Ridge. Faye sang softly to herself, a song Intoys had taught her in Apache, her pronunciation still clumsy but improving. He had been teaching both children his language, sharing his culture in small ways, and they absorbed it eagerly, hungry for knowledge, for connection to this man who had become so important to their lives. The town had changed in 3 months, or perhaps Thea's perception of it had changed. Where once she had seen only danger and desperation, now she saw community, saw people who had stood with them when it mattered, who had testified at the trials, who had demanded justice and kept demanding until it came. The trials had been swift and brutal, the evidence overwhelming. Every man involved in the attacks had been sentenced to long prison terms. The company executives who had ordered the violence had fled, but warrants had been issued. Bounties posted. Eventually they would be found. Eventually they would answer. Sheriff Coulter met them as they pulled up in front of the church, his deputy Tom Brewster beside him. Tom's shoulder had healed well, leaving only a scar and a story he told too often in the saloon. "Morning, Mrs. Kingsley," Coulter said, tipping his hat. "Intoys, good to see you up and moving." "Good to be up and moving," Intoys replied, helping Thea down from the wagon. "I wanted you to know," Coulter continued. "The territorial governor issued a formal apology yesterday. To the Apache tribes, to your brother, to everyone affected by the fraudulent land claims, he has ordered a complete resurvey of the territory, using honest surveyors this time, and he has promised to honor all existing treaties. That is good news," Intoys said, though his expression remained neutral. "I will believe it when I see the surveyor's reports." "Fair enough," Coulter acknowledged. "Trust has to be earned, especially after it has been broken so thoroughly." They unloaded the wagon, carrying supplies into the church where Martha Brennan directed traffic with the efficiency of a general commanding troops. Father Domingo blessed each jar of preserves with a smile, thanking Thea for her generosity, for her presence in the community, for the strength she had shown when the work was finished. Thea and Intoys walked through town, Faye between them, holding both their hands, swinging slightly with each step. People greeted them warmly, some with curiosity still, wondering about the Apache man and the widow, wondering what their relationship meant, but most with acceptance, with respect earned through shared hardship. They stopped at the general store where Thea needed thread and Faye wanted to look at the penny candy. While Thea made her purchases, Intoy stepped outside onto the boardwalk, his eyes scanning the street out of habit, always watching, always aware. A rider approached from the south, moving fast. He dismounted in front of the sheriff's office, went inside, emerged moments later with Coulter. They spoke urgently, the rider gesturing, Coulter's expression darkening. Then both men looked toward where Intoys stood. Coulter crossed the street quickly. "Intoys, there is news," he said. "About your wife." Intoys went very still. "My wife is dead," he said flatly. "She has been dead for 10 years. "That is what you were told," Coulter said carefully. "But this rider, he comes from a mission in Arizona. He says there is a woman there, an Apache woman, who was found wandering in the desert 3 weeks ago. She has no memory of where she came from or how she got there. But she has a name she remembers. She keeps repeating it. What name?" Intoys asked, though something in his chest had gone tight. "Cold, Ayana," Coulter said. "She says her name is Ayana. And she is looking for someone named Intoys." The world tilted. Intoys reached for the porch railing to steady himself. Ayana had been his wife's name, Ayana, who he had seen fall, who he had buried in the traditional way, whose spirit he had mourned for 10 years. That is impossible, he said. But his voice lacked conviction. Maybe, Coulter said. Or maybe she survived, maybe she was taken. Maybe she has been lost all these years. The writer says she bears scars consistent with gunshot wounds. Old scars, healed badly. He says she has been living with a different tribe, far to the south, with no memory of her past life. But something recently triggered her memory. Your name, and now she is searching. Behind them, the store door opened. Thea stepped out with Faye. She took one look at Indius's face and knew something had happened, something terrible. What is wrong? She asked, moving to his side. Intoys could not speak, could not find words. Coulter explained quietly, his voice gentle. Watching Thea's face as understanding dawned. As she realized what this meant, you have to go, Thea said finally. Her voice steady despite the tears gathering in her eyes. You have to go to her, if there is any chance she is alive. You have to find out. Thea, Intoys began. But she stopped him with a hand on his chest. No, she said firmly. I will not be the reason you do not search for your wife. I will not be the reason you live with doubt and guilt. If she is alive, she has been lost and suffering for 10 years. She deserves to be found. She deserves to have you look for her, and if it is her? Intoys asked, his voice raw. If she is alive, if she remembers me, what then? Thea's smile was sad but genuine. Then you will have a choice to make, she said. But it will be your choice, made with full knowledge. Not a choice made in ignorance while a woman who might be your wife wanders lost. Intoys pulled her close, holding her tight. His face buried in her hair. I do not want to leave you, he whispered. I know, Thea replied, her arms around him, but you have to. And I will be here when you return. Whether that is in a week or a month or a year, I will be here. And if you return and tell me you are staying with her, I will understand. I will let you go with love and gratitude for the time we had. And if I return alone? Intoys asked. Then we will continue what we started, Thea said. We will build a life together, a future. But first you must settle your past. You must know for certain. He left 2 hours later. Riding south on a horse James provided, carrying supplies and the name of the mission in Arizona. Thea stood on the porch with her children, watching until he disappeared over the hills. Faye was crying. Tucker stood silent and stoic. Trying to be strong. Will he come back? Faye asked. I do not know, Thea answered honestly. But I hope so. I hope with everything in me that he comes back. And that when he does, he is free to stay. The days passed slowly, turning into weeks. Thea threw herself into ranch work, into helping James, into teaching the children, into becoming part of the community. She did not speak of Intoys often, did not allow herself to dwell on his absence. But every evening she stood on the porch and looked south, hoping to see a rider approaching, 6 weeks after he left. On a morning bright with early summer sun, she saw him. He rode slowly, as if tired or unsure of his welcome. Thea's heart hammered as she walked out to meet him. The children running ahead, calling his name, he dismounted. Caught Faye as she launched herself at him, held Tucker's shoulder when the boy tried to act like he had not missed him. Then he looked at Thea, and she saw everything she needed to know in his eyes. It was her, he said quietly. My wife, Ayana, she is alive. She remembered me. Remembered our life together. Thea's heart broke and mended in the same moment. Then I am happy for you, she said. Meaning it. I am happy she was found, that you found each other again. I told her about you, Intoys continued. About us, about what we had begun to build. I told her everything, and she told me to come back to you. Thea's breath caught. What? She said she remembered loving me. Remembered our life, but she does not feel that anymore. 10 years of living as someone else, of building a different life. It changed her. She said it would be cruel to ask me to love the memory of who she was instead of the woman I had found. She said I deserved to be happy, that she wanted that for me. And she wanted to stay where she was, with the people who found her, who cared for her, who became her family. Are you certain? Thea asked, hardly daring to hope. Are you certain that is what you want? Intoy stepped closer, taking her hands in his. I am certain, he said. I will always carry love for who Ayana was. I will always be grateful she's alive and safe. But my heart, my future, that belongs to you now. If you will still have me. Thea's answer was a kiss, fierce and joyful, full of promise and relief and love that had waited patiently through doubt and distance. When they pulled apart, both were crying, both were smiling. So, James called from the porch. Grinning, does this mean you are staying? I am staying, Intoy confirmed, not taking his eyes off Thea. If she will have me, if her family will have me. I am staying, then welcome home, James said. And it was home, Thea realized, looking at Intoy. At her children gathered around them, at her brother on the porch. At the ranch spreading out before them. At the mountains rising in the distance. This was home. Not because of the land or the buildings, but because of the people. Because of love freely given and gratefully received. Because of promises kept and futures built together. Will you ride us there safely, please? She had begged in the darkness, and he had agreed, had sworn she would find him again. And she had, they had found each other, and now they would never let go.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.